Yeah, and now I believe we are going to be looking at Taran's team first. And before we do get into that, we have to, of course, mention his accomplishments. 2024 Lille Regional Top 4, 2023 Perth Regional Champion, 2022 NAIC Top 8, and, of course, in the same year, EUIC Top 16. So, two great IC results in 1 year, and of course a regional champion title, and now a top 4 regional accomplishment. Definitely one of the strongest players out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Just knocking out tournaments one by one in a row. Those 2022 results were with a team that's, I think, pretty similar to the one that Taran's using now, just leveraging a lot the power of strong tailwind offense with this Tornadus Urshifu is what it is now. Back in the day, it was, I believe, Charizard with the Dynamax mechanics. And so interesting to see Taran finding a way to interpret his playstyle in a new format.
Yeah, that's really interesting to see, because also like with Michael Kelch in the last game, he hasn't been around for quite as long as Taran has, but he also continued to play like that Dragapult Chien-Pao, because if that's your playstyle and you find a way to adapt it, I think that's always really cool to see, even if the Pokemon might not always be the same, but like the idea of your playstyle is always there in some way. And I think like the best players out there consistently finding a way to keep to their personal play style is just such a great skill that might not even be highlighted enough in VGC.
I couldn't agree more. I think that when you're this far into a tournament, you really have to play to your strengths, and I think Taran is doing exactly that. A lot of the move and Pokemon choices here are going to seem fairly conventional, but just wait and watch the way that he plays. It's going to be spectacular, and I'm really interested to see how this match goes.
Yeah, so, and now looking at his opposing team, which is going to be, Zeng Yisen, who did manage to place 8th in the Ranked Battle Season 5 of 2023. He's playing that Ogerpon, Wellspring Mask, the Flutter Mane I just mentioned before, the Heatran, Thundurus, Chien-Pao, and Dragonite. And I think we talked a little bit about this Heatran and Thundurus set before.
Yeah, we're both really excited to see how this works out. I think that Thundurus seems like a really intriguing counterpick to the very well-used Tornadus and Urshifu combination. It has that Sunny Day to reduce the power of Surging Strikes. It's got Wild Bolt Storm, which hits them both super effectively. It has Thunder Wave, which is more enduring speed control than Tailwind is. So if you can stall the Tailwind turns and get some paralysis off, you'll have the speed advantage longer term. And I think that it's interesting for Zeng to leverage some of the ability that it's really hard to prepare for an unconventional choice when you don't have a lot of information going into a match. And I think that I'm very intrigued to see not just the Thundurus, but that Solar Beam Heatran, and see if any of these unique choices wind up turning out well for Zeng and for China.
I really want to see a Solar Beam in the sun fire off into a Water Urshifu. Let's see if we get to see that in this upcoming best of 3, but a very interesting tech, because when I remember it was a little bit after the World Championships, people started to pick up Assault Vest Heatran a little bit, and I was a very big fan of the set, but I've never seen it being played with Solar Beam. I've always, we've always seen it with Terra Blast and of course the Terra Grass, but if you have Solar Beam, you don't necessarily need to go for the Terrestrialization. You don't always need it on the Heatran.
We see that the Heatran even does have the Terrestrialization, so if it wants to do 1.5 times a Terra Blast, Terra Grass, has that option too. Just some really interesting choices that I think speak to the fact that Zeng has put a lot of thought into trying to bring a less conventional team into this matchup to maybe be able to handle some of the more conventional tools that he might be expecting Taran to use.
Yeah, and we are going to be ready to go into the first round of this best of 3. So we are going to be watching from Taran's perspective, as we are going to see Heatran and Thundurus for Yisen's side, and the Urshifu and Rillaboom for Taran here. So Rillaboom going to set up that grassy terrain, but it is going to be immediately threatened by that Heatran on the other side. And this Thundurus, of course, can start dishing out some Thunder Waves if it wishes to do so, but could also go for a Sunny Day.
Yeah, I think interesting to see the two tools we were most interested in from Zeng's side of the field just being established right off the bat. We're going to see how well they work into this opposing team. I think Rillaboom and Urshifu both going to be in a tough spot against this Heatran because of the Terra Grass option, but perhaps that's to Taran's benefit longer term, because it feels like this Heatran's really encouraged to use up that Terrestrialization, and once that's happened, that really limits the options on Zeng's side of the field. So we'll have to see if Taran's able to get out of this turn. There might be some longer term benefits that he's able to get out of this lead.
Yeah, and we are going to see a terrestrialization here on that Heatran. I was just going to say that Taran can't really safely go for something like a Surging Strike into the Heatran, because it can go for that Terra Grass, which it did decide to do. And of course the Thundurus can also just go for a Wildstorm Bolt, but it is going to get Fake outed. So I'm not going to be able to attack this turn as a close combat, actually going to go into that Heatran. So covering for both, the option of if Heatran Terras or doesn't. Thundurus is going to flinch, as we are going to see a Heat Wave come out, but the Urshifu actually avoids it, but the Rillaboom is going to take super effective damage from this. It's going to take more than half HP, recover a little bit from that grassy terrain. The Urshifu did not take any damage thanks to that miss, but it is at -1 defense and special defense now.
I think seeing the miss, Zeng's probably pretty happy that the miss happened to be on the Urshifu and not on the Rillaboom. That's where you really want that Fire-type attack to go off. But it is tough to see that Urshifu, even though it was in the situation that wasn't ideal against the Heatran, close combat is still doing so much damage regardless of terrestrialization. And there's now just a lot that Taran can do with a full health Urshifu that he could switch out at any point. It might even be faster than the Thundurus to be able to threaten a Surging Strikes on this turn.
Oh, and it does go for the Surging Strikes into that Thundurus, and the Thundurus is playing a Citrus Berry, which means that now it will be able to recover a little bit of health. Gonna take those Surging Strikes very nicely. Probably won't be able to take another one of that move though, so he might be looking to knock out this Urshifu in this turn, but a Wood Hammer from the Rillaboom into that Thundurus is not going to be enough to knock it out, just barely surviving. Is the Thundurus going to go for a Wildstorm Bolt? It does! It hits both of these Pokemon, Urshifu going down, and Rillaboom just barely hanging on. So now is Heatran going to go for another Heat Wave, or maybe just a safe Flash Cannon to get a double knockout? It is going to be a Heat Wave, but it does connect, so 2 of Taran's Pokemon going down this turn.
We mentioned that this was going to be really important for Zeng to establish whether these tools are going to be useful, the Thundurus and the Heatran, and so far the answer is a resounding yes. That's spectacular to sort of get into position, be able to take out those 2 Pokemon, and to keep that Thundurus around. That just speaks wonderfully to its training to be able to handle all of these physical threats on Taran's side of the field. With that said, one of the scariest things when facing down a Tailwind team is allowing free switches into attackers later, and so we're going to have to see if Zeng has the right tools in the end of the game to be able to handle this Goldango as it starts locking into Make It Rains.
Yeah, I mean, of course, Taran's options here could be to just set up Tailwind and start going for Make It Rain, but, this is an Assault Vest Heatran, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's able to take one of those, and even if it doesn't, having Goldango be locked into Make It Rain means that it'll be losing special attack every single turn, and Yisen, of course, still has 2 more Pokemon in the back that we have not seen yet. But also the Heatran is Terra Grass, so it is, of course, weak to any incoming Bleak Wind Storms, but Yisen deciding to just switch it out and bring in this Ogerpon, which is going to be able to resist any Make It Rains, but will be weak to something like a Bleak Wind Storm from Thundurus. And the Goldango is actually going to go for a Terrestrialization into the Steel type.
Yeah, so Goldango definitely just going for damage right away. That's sort of Taran's only option, but interesting to see the choice that Zeng made for managing this damage. I think maybe not so confident that Heatran could take a Make It Rain right now, but perhaps later is going to be able to leverage the ability with that Goldango losing special attack. As we see, Thundurus not able to attack into that Goldango, it just goes into the Protect of the Tornadus, and Goldango gets that Make It Rain we've been alluding to off, but that was less than half on this Ogerpon, and now it's going to be even less as this Goldango gets to the point where it might start to be struggling to do damage after another Make It Rain or 2.
Yeah, that one Make It Rain now, of course, still, it did decent damage to this Ogerpon, but now, as we mentioned, even with the Terra Steel, it is going to lose special attack every single turn it uses that move. And now the Heatran coming back in here. Again, it is an Assault Vest Heatran, but, it has lost like half HP, so I'm confident it can take a Make It Rain. I'm not so sure it can take a Make It Rain and a Bleak Wind Storm, even with the Assault Vest. And the Make It Rain is going to come out here once again. This Heatran, yeah, taking it very nicely. Ogerpon also taking that. And now this Tornadus is free to go for a Bleak Wind Storm, but not before this Ogerpon goes for an Ivy Cudgel into the Goldango, doing some good damage. Bleak Wind Storm connecting with both of these Pokemon and knocking both of them out. And Taran really flipping the tables here back in his favor.
Yeah, just a spectacular way to leverage the fact that there's all of these grass-type answers that Zeng had to the Goldengo, and even though normally, at least when I see a Goldengo on the field, I really zero in on how much damage it is doing, Taran's really leveraging the fact that it's less about the steel-type attacks and more about the combination of steel and flying that's giving him a lot of options here, because that Terastallization was burned earlier from the Heatran. As we see, Fluttermane is the last Pokemon, and that's not ideal when staring down a Terra Steel Goldengo locked in to make it rain.
No, really not ideal, especially if it's only the Fluttermane and nothing else on the field. You know, the Skoldango, even though it has lost some special attack, it is still Choice Specs, it is still Terra Steel, and of course Fluttermane is weak to that Make It Rain, so wouldn't be surprised if another one here knocks it out easily, even though Fluttermane does have very nice special defense stats. The HP stat, really nothing great. So yeah, in combination with that Tornadus, I think this is going to be a win for Taran here in this game 1. Yeah, Goldengo really can't do much here aside from just lock itself into another Make It Rain. And Tornadus going to set up this Tailwind here since that did just expire. So, you know, you cannot speed this Fluttermane. And the Make It Rain, is it going to be enough? I'm going to say it is. As, yes, it will.
Yeah, absolutely. A resounding yes. Goldengo was designed to handle this Pokemon specifically in this situation. I really liked seeing how Taran handled that last turn, though, just like taking his time, knowing that he had the guaranteed win, but still thinking about, okay, what adjustments does my opponent have? Because we saw that a lot of the tools Zeng has are really effective, and it was more about Taran finding the right position at the right time to be able to break through that team, rather than something where like there's a clear path to victory in every single match.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe Yisen played that end game or that mid to end game a little bit too safe, and then it really ended up costing him, you know, just suddenly losing 2 of his Pokemon very suddenly. So yeah, going into game 2 now, I think, you know, of course I like the way in the early game he had his answers for this Urshifu from Taran, but really didn't have a way to deal with the Goldengo afterwards, because also, you know, once you go for that Terra Steel or the Terra Grass on the Heatran, it does not resist any Make It Rains anymore, meaning it takes a lot of, or it takes more damage from that move, and it gets super effective hits from Bleak Windstorm, so you might have to time that Terra a little bit differently, or find another way to take care of the Urshifu maybe.
Yeah, I think that Taran did a great job of showcasing just how scary Tailwind can be when you're willing to put people in these lose-lose situations where you have a lot of pressure from Urshifu and Rillaboom, and the only way to handle that is to burn your Terastallization, but once you burn the Terastallization, then you can't handle the other attackers on the team. And there's a lot of, like, difficult trade-offs that Taran is forcing Yisen to make that I think make it really difficult to figure out what to adjust for, although we'll see in a moment how Yisen has adjusted as we get into this next game.
Yeah, we are ready to get into this game too. It is going to be Ogerpon Fluttermane lead for Yisen here versus the Rillaboom and Qianpao. So really switching it up a little bit this game. Yeah, the Rillaboom back on the lead here. I believe we saw it in game 1 as well. And now this Fluttermane here, you know, it is a Choice Specs Fluttermane. Is gonna threaten this Qianpao a little bit, but it is, you know, the Rillaboom here is also threatening it with something like a Grassy Glide, which in combination with that Qianpao is gonna be able to deal a lot of damage to that Fluttermane. But that is what Yisen might have the Ogerpon on the field for, because it is playing Follow Me.
So the Ogerpon definitely gives Fluttermane a chance to start getting out a lot of damage here, while the Fluttermane is also immune to the Fake Out from Rillaboom, so definitely some options. One of the challenges is that I'm sure Yisen would have preferred to see the Urshifu out here instead of the Qianpao, and it's a good adjustment for Taran to make to be able to have that here. I think that it makes things a little bit more complicated for Yisen this turn as we see the Ogerpon even just switching out, because there's the threat of that Fake Out blocking the Follow Me from that Ogerpon on the first turn. Although we're seeing the Qianpao go for a Protect instead.
Yeah, switching out that Ogerpon there instead, Dazzling Gleam going out, but Qianpao, of course, with that Protect not taking any damage. Rillaboom, thanks to that Assault Vest, also taking that very nicely, and a high horsepower going into that Fluttermane slot, so maybe Taran predicting the Heatran to switch in instead of the Fluttermane, but, you know, catching it in the wrong slot as Heatran safely manages to switch in instead of that Ogerpon, and now really threatening this Rillaboom and the Qianpao. But of course the Qianpao is also playing Sacred Sword, which can also hit the Heatran super effectively, and of course Rillaboom's now playing high horsepower again also mean that this Heatran might not be as safe as it thinks it is, even though, you know, it is a fire type threatening a grass and ice type.
Heatran seems like such a powerful Pokemon in this situation, but it has to be able to get an attack off, and it's going to be really difficult to do that in this particular situation for the reasons you've mentioned. It does have Terrestrialization to get around some of those offensive options that Taran has, but those are also risky because as soon as you burn the Terrestrialization, things like that Goldengo or even just the Chien-Pao can get really out of hand.
Yeah, the Chien-Pao could, just go for something like an Icicle Crash, which it is gonna do, but Yisen deciding not to go for that Terra Grass just yet, but of course, Taran covering for both of those options with that high horsepower, meaning that this Heatran is gonna go down, and of course, that is one of the downsides to playing something like an Assault Vest Heatran, is you do not have access to Protect, so Taran really being able to cover there, no problem. Even if that Flutter Mane had, not switched and just stayed in, all it could have done is go for a Dazzling Gleam, and the Chien-Pao is playing Focus Sash, so it's definitely gonna stay on the field, and the Rillaboom wouldn't have gone down to it, even with a critical hit. So yeah, Taran really being able to safely double target that slot with an Icicle Crash and a high horsepower. Great play by him there. And now this Ogerpon is coming back in here for Yisen, and once again it could redirect these incoming Icicle Crashes away from the Dragonite, but maybe the Dragonite could also just go for something like a Terra Normal to not be weak to ice moves anymore and then just start firing off extreme speeds.
There are definitely some options from Yisen's side of the field to be able to get a bit of pressure back after that really tough situation with the Heatran. At the same time, definitely tough to have lost that piece, and I'm very curious what Yisen's going to be able to find now. Once again, he's lost the tool for handling that Goldengo before it hits the field, although we just saw a sneak peek from Taran that maybe that Goldengo's not around. Yisen doesn't know that yet, and so figuring out his game plan into this matchup is going to be really tough for him for this turn, I think.
Yeah, Tornado switching in here now again for Taran, as we are going to finally see a Terrestrialization here. It is going to be on the Dragonite for Yisen, which is going to Terra into that normal type, meaning that it will be able to fire off some very, very powerful Choice Band extreme speeds here, and is also not weak to ice types anymore. Extreme speed is going to come out into that Rillaboom slot, and it's not going to be able to knock it out. Rillaboom just barely hanging on as Horn Leech goes into the slot that was the Chien-Pao. It's now the Tornadus, so going to be resisting it, no problem. Wood Hammer into this Ogerpon is not enough to knock it out, but the recoil will take out Taran's Rillaboom here. Going down, and now it is Dragonite here threatening this Tornadus a little bit. It is playing Rocky Helmet though, so could also knock out this Dragonite without even attacking it.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful play from Taran to be able to start managing this Dragonite. Switching out the Chien-Pao to make sure that Rillaboom was able to survive the extreme speed was a really cool play I hadn't thought about at all while going into that turn. But as you mentioned, this Dragonite really could snowball out of control here. Taran doesn't have a lot of defensive options for it because he doesn't have the Goldengo this time around. And if the Chien-Pao hits the field, sure, it has a Focus Sash, so it can survive an extreme speed, but it makes the partner much more vulnerable to those extreme speeds. Rocky Helmet is great, it can do some damage, but it's not going to finish off the Dragonite, and so I'm curious where Taran's going to be able to find the damage to finish it off.
Yeah, Taran deciding to switch in his Urshifu here now, and confident that both of these Pokemon, I mean, depending on how they are trained, probably going to be able to take an extreme speed, but of course they do still have to worry about that Ogerpon. The Ogerpon here, interestingly enough, could redirect any priority moves, so, if the Urshifu decided to go for an Aqua Jet to try finish off the Dragonite real quick, that can be redirected by Ogerpon. And then Ogerpon, of course, having the water absorbability would just heal up from that. So really the only way the Urshifu's taking out this Ogerpon here is through a close combat, and the Tornadus, if it wants to take out the Ogerpon, it has to hit a Bleakwood Storm.
Oh, and we see a switch from the Dragonite, just really struggling with this situation from that close combat pressure from the Urshifu, and going back into the Flutter Mane. So no extreme speeds coming out for now. Maybe confident that wouldn't get a KO as a Tailwind comes up on Taran's side of the field. And this close combat just goes into that Flutter Mane. A wonderful switch in from Yisen. As the Horn Leech finishes off the Urshifu. That was a wonderful play. Wow.
Wow, I think Yisen really had to go for that read there. He was probably expecting the close combat to come out there, either into the Dragonite or the Ogerpon. And yeah, really hoping that he decided to target the Dragapult slot, which he did. So Flutter Mane switch there, perfect, and then the Urshifu just going down to that Horn Leech. Wow, really yeah, that Urshifu being gone might... I don't know how much it really helps. This Chien Pao, I feel like, is still the greatest threat here. But this Ogerpon recovering so much health means that, it might be able to support Yisen just a little bit longer.
The Horn Leech is pretty huge, especially with the grassy terrain recovery to complement it. But I think, as you mentioned, just there's a lot of offensive momentum on Taran's side of the field for the next 3 turns because of that Tailwind, because of having the Chien Pao out. It can definitely take its choice of target to KO, and you've got the Bleakwind Storm to do a decent amount of damage to whatever it doesn't. If Yisen can get the right Pokemon to survive just to get a little bit more damage, that Dragonite will be able to clean everything up. But it all really depends on how much Taran's able to get out of this turn, if he's able to take a KO and limit the damage coming back to him.
Yeah, and a Follow Me coming out here from that Ogerpon, really trying to help this Fluttermane stay alive. The Icicle Crash is not going to be enough to knock it out, and this Bleakwood Storm is not going to be able to knock out the Fluttermane either, but the Ogerpon will finally faint to that attack, and now I'm pretty sure we're going to see something like a Dazzling Gleam, yes, coming out to bring this Chien Pao down to its Focus Sash, and Tornado's still hanging on very, very nicely, and I think this is just a great situation for Taran to finish up this game, because the Dragonite is still in the back, but it is at such low HP, and it can only target one Pokemon at a time, and again, if it does target that Tornadus, I'm not quite sure if the Rocky Helmet would knock it out. I think it might survive with just like 1 or 2 HP.
It's one of the great things about watching offensive teams play against each other. It's really hard to tell who's winning until like the very last turn, because the games are just so dynamic. But I think that Ogerpon surviving there was so huge, and it might have just gotten Dragonite enough time to be able to finish off Taran's side of the field. Being able to survive and make that Bleakwind Storm spread damage instead of single target, meaning that Fluttermane could survive. And now this Chien Pao's Focus Sash is broken, so it's just 2 more attacks from Dragonite if it gets the right targets to finish things off. And as long as the Chien Pao doesn't get a Sacred Sword off into it, I think that Dragonite can handle a Rocky Helmet recoil. Might be able to finish off this game even.
And a Protect here from the Tornadus, and a Protect from the Chien Pao as well, so maybe just scouting to see if this Dragonite blocks into another move. But yeah, is actually not going to go for an Extreme Speed, and Dazzling Gleam not going to do any damage because both Pokemon decided to go for a Protect. But Dragonite instead going for an Aerial Ace actually into this Chien Pao slot. So, I mean, at this point, like, the Chien Pao is at just 10 HP, so anything will knock it out. And then, an Aerial Ace, of course, might be able to hit something like a Rillaboom in the back a little bit better.
Yeah, so a crucial detail about that past turn that I may have overlooked, apologies. That Chien Pao has the Ghost Rascalization, so if that Dragonite had locked into Extreme Speed, that would have been game over for Yisen. And so he has to lock into something like that Aerial Ace. It was Force, and Taran was just checking, what move is my opponent locking into? Do I need to go for the Terra Ghost, or can I go for something else? Just really leveraging the fact that he preserved Terra until the very end of the game, as the Bleakwind Storm connects and finishes off that Dragonite. So even though it was set up to knock out the whole opposing side of the team, it wasn't even able to get the attack off. What an amazing play from Taran.
I missed that as well, that Taran did not go for a Terrestrialization yet, so of course there is the option for Chien Pao to, go for a Terra Ghost, but yeah, Taran managing to finish off Yisen's last 2 Pokemon and winning this set 2-0, and so that endgame really smart by Taran to just, go for the double protect and then see, what does the Dragonite lock into. Okay, if it locks into Extreme Speed, I can go for Terra Ghost. If it doesn't, I can go for Terra Steel on my Tornadus and then just finish the game.